Next Friday marks a significant development in the 17-year-long Madeleine McCann case.
Portuguese police have told BBC Panorama they have apologised to the parents of Madeleine McCann for the way they handled the case.
How much of a difference would it have made if police acted on his phone calls?
Big difference.
The key witness in the Madeleine McCann case reveals everything. Her disappearance quickly escalated into a globally notorious case, drawing massive media attention and sparking extensive searches and investigations that have persisted for almost 20 years. Who could have imagined that the family's peaceful holiday would lead to one of the most baffling and heart-wrenching mysteries of our time? Come along with us as we dive deep into the details of this case, guided by the revelations of the star witness for the Madeleine McCann case. A family vacation turns to tragedy. Madeleine McCann was a 3-year-old British girl, who vanished from her family's holiday apartment in Praia da Luz, Portugal, on the evening of May 3, 2007. What began as a quiet family vacation soon turned into one of the most infamous and heartbreaking cases of modern times. The disappearance of Madeleine captured the attention of people around the world and became a focal point for media coverage, sparking widespread concern and countless theories. As the years pass, a critical piece of evidence emerges that could potentially unravel the mystery surrounding her disappearance. What secret will be disclosed in the next chapter of this enduring saga? Madeleine's family, including her parents Kate and Jerry McCann and her younger twin siblings, stayed in a ground-floor apartment at a holiday resort. On the night of May 3rd, the McCanns and their friends, a group known as the Tapas 7, dined at a nearby restaurant about 70 meters from the apartment while taking turns to check on their sleeping children. At around 10 o'clock, Kate McCann went back to the apartment to check on the children. Upon entering, she immediately noticed something was wrong. The bedroom door was more open than when they had left it, and the curtains were blowing in the wind. When she looked into the room, Madeleine's bed was empty. Her daughter had vanished without a trace. The hours and days following Madeleine's disappearance were critical, but the response by authorities has been heavily criticized for missteps. The Portuguese police were slow to alert border authorities and other neighboring countries about the missing child, delaying critical time in which Madeleine could have been found. Forensics work at the apartment was reportedly mishandled, and public appeals for information were delayed. For the McCanns, the horror of losing their daughter was compounded by the media frenzy that ensued. The case was widely covered in both British and international press, with journalists, photographers, and curious onlookers descending on Praia da Luz. In the months following the disappearance, Madeleine's image was broadcast across the globe, and her parents launched a high-profile media campaign to raise awareness and funds for the search. Celebrities like David Beckham and J.K. Rowling helped keep Madeleine's name in the public eye. The Portuguese police initially focused on local suspects, but were criticized for not investigating quickly or thoroughly enough. Within months, suspicion began to fall on Madeleine's parents themselves. In September 2007, Portuguese authorities officially named Kate and Jerry McCann as arguidos, formal suspects, in their daughter's disappearance. The media sensationalized the idea that the McCanns might have been involved, with theories suggesting an accidental death and cover-up. These accusations devastated the family, who maintained their innocence and insisted they had nothing to do with Madeleine's disappearance. Eventually, the McCanns were cleared as suspects, and the Portuguese case was shelved in 2008 due to a lack of evidence. However, they continued their private search, hiring investigators and working closely with British authorities. Their resilience and determination to find out what happened to Madeleine has been a constant feature in this tragic saga. A significant breakthrough in the investigation came years later. In 2020, German authorities announced that they had a prime suspect in Madeleine's disappearance, Christian Bruckner, a convicted offender who had a history of repulsive acts against the most vulnerable and other violent crimes. Bruckner was living in Portugal at the time of Madeleine's disappearing, and his phone records placed him in Praia da Luz on the night she disappeared. Bruckner, a German national, had a long history of criminal activity, including crimes against children. He had been convicted of child molestation in Germany, and in 2019, he was sentenced to 7 years in prison for raping a 72-year-old woman in Praia da Luz in 2005, just 2 years before Madeleine went missing. German prosecutor Hans Christian Wolters publicly identified Bruckner as the main suspect. suggesting that Madeleine was likely no longer alive. While no formal charges have been brought against Bruckner in relation to Madeleine's case, authorities believe he may have taken by force and murdered her. Investigators have combed through his past, uncovering a disturbing pattern of predatory behavior. However, the lack of direct evidence tying him to Madeleine's disappearance remains a hurdle in solving the case. One of the most significant pieces of information came from a man named Helga Busching, who had once been a close acquaintance of Bruckner. According to Busching, Bruckner had made a chilling comment about Madeleine, claiming she hadn't screamed during her forced disappearance. This statement has been interpreted by some as a confession, although it has not yet been enough to formally charge him. In addition to Bruckner's known criminal history and suspicious behavior, investigators uncovered that he had been living in a camper van near Praia da Luz around the time of Madeleine's disappearance. This vehicle became a focus of the investigation, and forensic searches were conducted. However, concrete evidence directly linking Bruckner to Madeleine remains elusive. Despite this new suspect, the case remains open and unresolved. Madeleine's disappearance continues to haunt both her family and the public as new theories and leads emerge, but none definitively solving the mystery. The McCanns have never given up hope of finding their daughter. In 2023, they mark the 16th anniversary of Madeleine's disappearance, still hopeful for answers. The case has had a lasting impact on child safety measures and the way authorities handle missing children cases. Amber Alerts and similar systems have been adopted in Europe, and there is a greater awareness of child disappearance thanks to the global media attention that Madeleine's case received. It has also highlighted the importance of swift action in the critical hours following a child's disappearance, something that was lacking in Madeleine's case. Will the unveiling of this critical evidence finally provide the answers her family has been seeking? Decades without answers, the investigation into what happened to Madeleine McCann continues to this day. While Christian Bruckner remains a suspect, the lack of direct evidence leaves the case unresolved. The McCann family continues to advocate for their daughter, holding out hope that one day the truth will come to light and Madeleine will be found. For now, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann remains a heartbreaking mystery, one that has captivated and saddened people around the world for nearly 2 decades. The search for answers continues, with many still asking, will we ever truly know what happened to Madeleine McCann? Rabba Helga reported seeing upsetting videos that depicted 2 of the 3 violent crimes, identifying Christian B as the main suspect. In one of the videos, there was a very young girl, possibly 17 years old, sitting on a couch with Christian B. His actions were shockingly violent, clearly indicating that he hurt people on purpose. Christian B was infamous for causing immense suffering, and his acts of violence were far worse than anyone could have imagined. Prosecutor Christian Wolters faced a significant challenge. He needed to prove that Bruckner was guilty of these 2 heinous crimes, even though the victims remained unidentified and the video evidence had disappeared. It's certainly not ideal without the videos, Wolters acknowledged. Having video or DNA evidence would make a huge difference, but we don't have that, so we have to rely on the existing evidence. We believe it's sufficient, but the court will have to decide. Bruckner was an exceptionally dangerous man. He was already serving a prison sentence of 7 years for attacking a 72-year-old woman and had a long history of harming children. His victims came from various age groups, which seemed odd at first. However, Mark Hoffman, a criminal profiler, explained that Bruckner's crimes were not about intimate desire or relationships. Bruckner's acts are about control, Hoffman stated. He preys on those who cannot defend themselves, which is why he targets both children and the elderly. The common factor is their vulnerability. One of the most horrifying attacks lasted for several hours and was recorded on video. A crucial part of this new trial focused on Bruckner's 3rd alleged victim, an Irish woman named Hazel Bean. She was just 20 years old and alone, sleeping in her apartment when, in 2004, Bruckner allegedly broke in and attacked her for 4 terrifying hours. Hazel reported the crime to the police, but at first they didn't take her seriously. Everything changed in 2010 when Bruckner became a suspect in the infamous Madeleine McCann case. Hazel immediately recognized him as the man who had assaulted her. "I always said my attacker was a German man with piercing blue eyes and a voice I'll never forget," she recalled. But that wasn't even the worst part. During the investigation into Bruckner, the police searched his motorhome and uncovered horrifying evidence of other victims, revealing the true extent and brutality of his crimes. This made the case even more disturbing and complex. In an old abandoned factory once owned by Bruckner, investigators made a chilling discovery. Hidden underground, near where his former pet had been buried, they found 8,000 USB drives filled with horrifying footage. These videos contained brutal acts against both animals and children. The victims included babies and young girls, some no older than 12. Given Christian Bruckner's violent criminal history, these new discoveries became a central focus of his current trial. Many now question whether he will ever be released, especially since German law allows for life imprisonment. Christian Bruckner, showing no remorse, had been involved in crimes against children for years, dating back to 2013. On one disturbing online forum, he openly discussed his twisted fantasies, which investigators fear he may have acted on. One of the most terrifying concerns is that he might have played a role in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann in 2007. Prosecutor Christian Wolters believes that they have compelling evidence linking Bruckner to her disappearing. They know he was near Maddie's holiday apartment the night she disappeared, with mobile data placing him close by. He had previously worked at the resort, and some claim that he even admitted his involvement in her disappearance. But that wasn't even the most chilling revelation. The prosecution is confident that Bruckner murdered Madeleine McCann, and they believe they have sufficient evidence to support this claim. The case is under intense scrutiny, with the world watching to see what happens next. German prosecutor Christian Wolters has promised a thorough and careful investigation, but he is keenly aware of the pressure to find undeniable proof. If they gather enough evidence, charges will be filed against Bruckner. If not, the case could be closed, leaving Madeleine's fate a mystery with no clear answers. What happens if they can't prove it? If the evidence isn't strong enough, it could mark the end of this long search for the truth. For decades, stories of missing children have moved people around the world. These incidents bring grief and loss, not only to the families involved, but also to entire communities and nations. Let's reflect on some of the most memorable and haunting cases of missing children, and how these tragedies have impacted society. One of the most well-known cases is that of Ethan Potts, who disappeared in 1979 while walking to his school bus in New York City. He was only 6 years old. His face was one of the first to be featured on milk cartons in a national effort to find him. Years later, Pedro Hernandez confessed to the crime and was convicted, but for Ethan's family, the resolution came too late. His disappearance left a deep emotional scar on the nation, reminding everyone of the fragility of childhood. But that wasn't the worst part. In 1966, 3 siblings, Jane, Arna, and Grant Beaumont, vanished from a beach near Adelaide, Australia. The Beaumont children were last seen with a tall, blonde man, but they never returned home. Despite extensive investigations, their fate remains unknown. This case marked a turning point for Australians, changing how parents viewed their children's safety and shattering a previously carefree sense of trust. As another piece of the puzzle surfaces, what new twist will the investigation into Madeleine's disappearance take next? The haunting cases of missing children. Another deeply tragic case took place in 1981 when 6-year-old Adam Walsh was taken by force from a Sears department store in Hollywood, Florida. What began as a routine shopping trip with his mother quickly escalated into a nightmare that would change the way America deals with missing children forever. After weeks of searching and hope that Adam might be found alive, the devastating discovery of his severed head shattered any possibility of his safe return. The rest of his remains were never located. Otis Toole, a drifter with a history of violent crimes, eventually confessed to the brutal murder, though he was never formally charged, leaving lingering questions and an incomplete sense of justice for Adam's grieving family. The unimaginable pain and suffering endured by Adam's parents, John and Reeve Walsh, not only left a permanent scar on their lives, but also galvanized them into action. Determined to prevent other families from experiencing the same horror, they went on to found the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. This pivotal organization became a cornerstone in efforts to locate missing children and protect them from exploitation. Their tireless advocacy also led to significant reforms in how law enforcement and the public respond to cases of missing children, influencing policy changes and enhancing the coordination of searches nationwide. Adam Walsh's tragic fate, though heartbreaking, ultimately ignited a movement that reshaped the landscape of child safety in the United States, creating a lasting legacy in his name. Still, this wasn't the most shocking event. In 2002, 14-year-old Elizabeth Smart was taken from her home in Salt Lake City. She was held captive and abused by Brian David Mitchell and his wife Wanda Barzee for 9 months. Miraculously, Elizabeth was found alive after being recognized in public. Her survival story reignited hope and reshaped the national dialogue about missing children and the importance of keeping their stories alive. Then there's the case of Amber Hagerman, who was taken while riding her bicycle in Arlington, Texas, in 1996. Amber was only 9 years old. Tragically, her body was found 5 days later, but her perpetrator was never caught. Her death led to the creation of the Amber Alert system, which has since helped save many children by quickly spreading vital information to the public when a child goes missing. Each of these cases has left a profound impact on society, influencing how we approach child safety and the search for missing children. Perhaps the most devastating aspect is the ongoing uncertainty, the pain of not knowing what happened, a torment shared by many families around the world. In 1982, the disappearance of 12-year-old Johnny Gosch shocked the quiet town of West Des Moines, Iowa. Johnny was taken while delivering newspapers early one morning. Several witnesses saw him being forced into a car, but despite numerous investigations, no solid leads emerged for many years. In a strange twist, Johnny's mother, Noreen Gosch, later claimed that her son briefly escaped his captors and visited her, but this has never been confirmed. His case brought national attention to child safety and the disturbing issue of human crimes. In 1991, 11-year-old J.C. Lee Dugard was taken on her way to a bus stop near her home in South Lake Tahoe, California. She was held captive for 18 years by Philip and Nancy Garrido, enduring unimaginable abuse. The nightmare ended when Garrido's suspicious behavior caught the attention of law enforcement, leading to his arrest and JC's rescue. After nearly 2 decades, she was reunited with her family, a rare and inspiring story of survival. In 1993, 12-year-old Polly Kloss was taken by force from her own home during a sleepover in Petaluma, California. Richard Allen Davis broke into her house, tied up her friends, and took Polly at knife point. A massive search followed, but tragically, Polly's body was found 2 months later. Davis confessed to her murder and was sentenced to death. Polly's death heightened awareness about horrifying acts against the most vulnerable and led to the creation of several organizations dedicated to preventing such tragedies. Another unforgettable case dates back to 1972, when Kenneth Parnell, a known criminal, took 7-year-old Stephen Stainer. For 7 years, Stephen lived under the name Dennis and was led to believe that his family no longer wanted him. The story took a courageous turn when Parnell took another boy, Timothy White, in 1980. Stephen decided to escape with Timothy, and they both found their way to the police, reuniting with their families. Stephen's bravery moved the entire country, and his story was later made into a TV movie called I Know My First Name is Stephen. But even before these tragic events, there was the infamous case of Charles Lindbergh Jr. in 1932. The young son of aviator Charles Lindbergh was taken from his crib. Despite a ransom being paid, the child's body was found months later. Bruno Hauptmann was arrested, tried, and finished for the crime. Though doubts remain about his guilt, this high-profile case led to making it a federal crime to transport a disappearing person across state lines. Do you think the international media attention helped or hindered the search for Madeleine McCann? Like and subscribe for more.